Welcome to Wednesday Q&A, where you all ask the question and we answer. I'm joined as always by my lovely, gorgeous, intelligent, inspiring co-host, Kristen Williams.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Laura. This is the best.
Hey, honey, so fun. All right, so this is from Bunker Bunker. What could help soreness slash stiffness in the middle spine? It feels linked to digestion as well. Ooh.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, I'm guessing he or she, they're talking about their middle back, their thoracic spine, which is the part of the spine that attaches to your rib cage. And while, when we think of digestion, we think of more of the stomach, but, the stomach kind of can creep up in that area. So, and I also find that people will have issues with digestion with a poor rounded, but, closed off posture. When you think about the thoracic spine, it needs to be mobile. Not super mobile. It's the least mobile of part of your spine, but it attaches to the ribs. It needs to be help that rib cage stack right over the pelvis. So if you are rounded forward, which a lot of people are, and they are talking about stiffness, which, oftentimes is usually more stuck in a flexed position. They have difficulty extending. Well, you can imagine that can absolutely affect digestion, how your stomach is feeling. If you've ever had a big meal, the last thing you want to do is slouch. You lean back, you unzip your pants, and you extend your thoracic spine. That's what we do to help digestion. So to me, that's first I've heard someone link it, but it's not surprising when we think about it just physiologically and biomechanically. So, I mean, so many great ways to mobilize your thoracic spine using foam rollers, arching your back over. I think he or she is probably, missing some rotation components too, lying on your side, adding that chest opening coupled with the roll back rotation just to get some movement in the thoracic spine is also going to facilitate movement around those, digestive organs. When we move our bowels better. You think about, when do you get stopped up? It's when you're traveling, when you're flying long distances, when you're not moving like you normally do, when you're unable to move like you normally do. So, I completely think that if this person can work on, and I'm sure Laura's going to talk about some more great ways to mobilize your middle back, they are going to see major improvements in how their stomach feels, how their digestion works. Laura, what else do you have to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great, just a great insight this person has, Bunker, and it is really something that probably a lot of people experience. So the two things I would add, one is, if you're sitting a lot or even standing, you can be in this flex position. And that often when you're stiff there, when you stand up straighter or attempt to, you just push your ribs forward. So you don't ever find that kind of stacked position where what we call neutral, which is when we're in our alignment and everything is balanced. So you can even practice like putting your hand on your lower ribs and back and trying to actually move your front body back into that, and you'll feel hopefully some opening. And the area between the ribs is called the intercostal space. We want that to be pretty even between all the ribs. So often people that are describing this stiff middle back, it feels just really locked down. But then when it locks down and they try and lift up, all they do is move their ribs forward. So the big thing to remember with this is when that pattern is ingrained, you're also not tapping into your deeper postural muscles, which, by the way, share fascia with your viscera. I mean, there's the low back and the front deep core muscles are very close together. And those front deep core muscles, like the transverse and some of you in the internal obliques, are very close to the fascia of the viscera, which is, your gut. So if you're not working those core muscles, they actually can help the motility of digestion. And so that's why, again, when you're just sitting for long periods of time, there's nothing that is making that there obviously is some natural digestion happening, but it's really accompanied by movement. When, if you ever feel like you're constipated, you need to move. You need to get in there. So, get deep in there and help some of that move around. And when you do that, if you find there's a ton of tenderness when you're getting in there, imagine all this intersection between the innards and the muscles, because they are close to each other and they are kind of sticky, and you just need them to have some glide and slide, because that helps the motility. So posture, also just stacking that rib cage. So when you're sitting or standing, just think the bottom of your ribs in front is your xiphoid. You don't have to go there, but just imagine that trying to be in the same line as your pubic bone. You can even kind of draw it down there without rounding, right? We're trying to stay upright, but it's this connection of how to hold the ribs in a good position, and then do the things like Kristen was talking about: rotation, extending. Extending is not just thrusting the ribs back, it's actually getting really long, stretching your spine up, and then trying to open the chest and feel the scapula kind of catch you as you lean back. But you're going to have tone in your abdominals unless you're just on the chair, which is a great stretch to do. You can do this at the chair, the door, like a door stretch. And then that rotation is really, again, stack it first and then start moving like you were whittling. We always talk about like whittling a stick, and that's your spine. So you're not doing it from your shoulders, because then you're going to make those areas, the intercostal space, close down in one area. And we can do side bending and have it close down. You want those ribs to be free to move, but you have to start the position of neutral. So think about that. Like, check out our posture series. We go into this in detail. How do you find triple S? Well, S, the scapula, are where the shoulders attach essentially, or connect via muscles and fascia to the back of the rib cage. When your scapula is moving better and your thoracic spine is moving better, your shoulders are going to move better. You're going to move better all around, and movement is what's going to help digestion. So I love this connection, and get back to us if that helps you.
All right. Next question. Miriam Tabrez asks, I see a lot of handstand, quote, pros teach a posterior pelvic tilt for a straight line. Is that okay to do? I will go ahead and jump right in. The answer is going to be, it always depends. But yeah, I think it's fine, because what they're basically doing is, a lot of movement we do is a movement pattern that doesn't actually produce movement, but is to stabilize against another movement. So in this case, for example, what do most people do in handstand? They do that thing like the banana back, right? They're arching, huge anterior tilt. So producing the feeling of a posterior tilt, and in fact, actually might be getting it, is actually, and once you get your straight line, you don't have to do a ton of that, but you can do that as a deterrent toward the natural feeling of anterior tilt. Because when you are, I was explaining this again to my client, because when I was, getting her ribs back, because she was a dancer. And so she really leads with her chin and her chest, and that's leading to all the shoulder into the forearm stuff. And when I got her in line, she's like, I feel like I'm just like now a straight pole and I've lost my natural curves. And I said, you are a straight pole in terms of the center of gravity going down. That is what you want. You're not losing your natural curves, but the line of your gravitational forces is, we want it to be a straight line. So if you feel like you're a straight line, that's actually good, because that means that's the clearest, most efficient way for gravity to travel and then travel back up. When you get excessive curves in one direction or diminished in another, you actually are losing that vertical line, the center of gravity. So take that upside down in a handstand, you want that line, you want it. And to do that, you're going to have to think, where are the places that most people tend to over-exaggerate? And it's that they lose their pelvis. They'll tip their pelvis because the weight of their legs just makes it easy to do. You can still stand on your hands, by the way. A lot of people do, and tip the pelvis with the weight of the legs and still kind of manage. Is it efficient? No, because that whole line of center of gravity going down through your body is not there. So this coaching to posteriorly tilt your pelvis is one way of doing it. You can think of pulling your pubic bone up towards your sternum. There's a lot of ways you can externally cue to help it happen. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's to do that as a counter to the natural tendency for the pelvis to tilt.
And I would argue that there aren't many people who, in that position with the arms in full shoulder flexion, who are able to truly go into a posterior pelvic tilt. So while remember, posteriorly tilting the pelvis is different than being posteriorly tilted. So
exactly. It's the action of it versus there's not
going posteriorly tilt to get to neutral, to get closer to neutral, to get out of that anterior tilt. Because a lot of times people are just tight in their lats and their shoulders, so it naturally pulls the pelvis into that position. Plus, it's just easier because you aren't it is a lot harder to balance in full shoulder flexion versus being not flexed and looking at your hands, and you kind of go into that banana back. We aren't as strong at this end range of shoulder. So, but by posteriorly tilting the pelvis, it can help you. Like you said, Laura, you move in one place to affect another. It can help you with the shoulders. It can help you engage the core.
Right. It can tighten up that thoracodorsal fascia that is going to give you, that connects, by the way, huge from the glutes all the way up into the scapula stabilizers. So by firming that up with the action of posterior pelvic tilting, it is going to help you stabilize. But to your point, like if you're tight there, that's something you're going to have to work on because you might find, you do that and there's a leak somewhere else.
It is. It's like, and then especially then you get upside down and you're all confused. Where am I? I've got no idea.
I always say, handstands are like the truth teller because you really cannot you can hang, but you're not going to be able to do it for long. And it's not going to ever feel really safe and secure by just hanging on your joints.
Yeah.
All right. Nin Facampos 29. Which exercises or stretches should we be doing on a daily basis to preserve our joints? Great question.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a cookie cutter answer to that. I know, Laura, you and I probably both have our favorites based on, we see patterns. We see patterns in bodies. We see a lot of hip restriction. So we see a lot of, restriction in flexion, extension, rotation. We see a lot of restriction in the posterior, like upper cervical area. We see a lot of restriction in the thoracic spine. So I would argue I have my favorites of just doing like a simple cat-cow is a great way to keep your spinal mobility. Doing some hip circles, circling truly just the femur, moving within the pelvis. A lot of us are limited there. So you can do that in a variety of ways. You can do that in a supported bridge, just moving your hip around. You can do a supported bridge just internally and externally, like a windshield wiper, your hips. You can do that in a three-legged dog with how we love to do it, or dolphins, circling the hips around. Great way to keep mobility there. Thoracic extension, doing some sort of a extension over a block is a great way to just combat gravity that we find ourselves fighting against all day in a poor posture. And then the triple S is basically mobility for a lot of that area, but that posterior, that suboccipital region, that lifting of the mastoid process, right behind the jaw, up and away, kind of growing taller, getting some length. Certainly those are like probably my top 3 or 4 based on what I see. Oh, ankle. Let's not forget foot and ankle, really getting into that ankle dorsiflexion that a lot of people are lacking. So, some sort of a soleus stretch or a glide of the talus, which is, part of the ankle joint, that posterior glide to really work on maintaining your ankle mobility. Because if you don't have mobility in the ankle, you're going to usually send it right up to your low back, into the knees, etc., which are two areas that are already injured enough. But it is not, again, cookie cutter. Everybody needs this. It's just a nice way to kind of keep tabs. And if you start noticing that, oh, wow, this feels stiffer than it did 6 months ago, you can keep doing it. Or if you see a difference left to right, finding a little balance in your body can go a long, long way. What else do you have to add to that, Laura?
I think you covered it a lot. I mean, I think doing like in LYT, we do so much movement variability, and that is the best way to cover all these bases, so that you get, say, you're doing a side lunge and you're getting ankle dorsiflexion, you're getting hip flexion, you're having a nice extended spine, and then you could add some rotation to it, because thoracic rotation is, in addition to thoracic extension, is often really limited. And then you're getting some nice opening for that adductor. So if I'm side lunging to the right and deepening into right hip flexion and ankle dorsiflexion, my left adductor, there's long ones and there's short ones that attach to the pubic bone on that left side that are getting a nice pull, which almost everyone tends to be a little restricted in adductors. Those are the inner thighs. We talk about groins and all that, kind of this synonymous. Yes, and I agree. Like, start by doing a triple S regularly where you get feedback. Go to the wall, go to the floor, see where do you have the most trouble in connecting to the surface, whether it's the wall or the floor. If it's your head, probably need a lot more neck stuff, doing that opening of the suboccipitals, doing some lateral flexion, rotation, freeing it up. But more than anything, you can do these mobility drills, but then you have to pay attention. Like, where is my skull stacked on my neck throughout the day? And then, like you said, going down the chain, doing thoracic rotation and extension, shoulder stuff. I mean, it's fascinating because everyone pretty much is born with the ability for full shoulder, like a full 360 of our shoulder. But almost everyone loses that, right? Because of gravity and our jobs and our lifestyles. Whereas our hips, not everybody has the same ability structurally to do the ranges, but you can stay within the range that's available to you for your hip, and you need to. And so the biggest thing about mobility and stretching is how you do it is more important than anything. Because if you think you're just stretching your hip or mobilizing your hip, but in fact, you're also moving your back with it and your pelvis, you're not going to change your mobility in your hip. And in fact, you're just going to reinforce some movement patterns that aren't going to serve you. So really pay attention to that. And yes, take LYT. I mean, because you're going to just get so educated on this. It's not going to be something that you'll just wake up and you'll feel like, oh, naturally, I just need to roll my shoulders out. That's what I need. That's really what we're serving up more than anything, is helping your brain-body communication so that you are really, you're tapped in. You know what you need, and you honor it and give it, and then it's like a refresh. But you don't have to, I'm not trying to operate from my 1999 hardware. That's really hard to do. I want to operate from like yesterday or a couple weeks before, and refresh that.
I'm looking at Slim
what was
Shady.
that?
I'm looking at
Slim Shady has terrible posture right now. He's terrible.
Really does.
Poor.
I'm so sad.
Poor. Okay. Let's do this last question, because this is another handstand question from Home Life 11. Words of wisdom for people who are strong enough but fear going into handstand, because we know fear is a mother effer, right? It is the thing that unites almost everybody in handstand. So just know you're never, ever alone in that.
It's scary. It is super scary. And this is where I think you really have to have fun with it. And know, like you said, Laura, you're not alone. I know I had a great advantage. I used to do gymnastics when I was little, so I'm used to being on my hands. Now doing it in the middle of a wooden floor, that took me years to get the guts to do, because I was scared. So for a while, I did it against the wall. Then I knew I needed to come away from the wall. So I went out and I did it in the grass, and I did it, someplace that was at the beach, someplace I could grab, where I felt like I had more cushion if I fell. I think you need to know that you've got a good fallout plan. So, really, I have worked with a lot of people on handstands, and sometimes it's boiled down to me teaching people how to do a cartwheel. A cartwheel is basically how you're coming out of a handstand. And if you don't know how to do a cartwheel, that idea of lifting a hand to step out is very scary. So, working on doesn't have to be a perfect cartwheel, but just this idea of being on one hand at a time can go a long way. So just have fun. I do think that there's a certain stress anyway about a handstand that's kind of goal oriented. So kind of maybe try to let go of that. I know that was big for me. I definitely got little head case, issues for a while with handstands. And I just said, forget about it. Don't spot me. Leave me alone. I'll figure it out. And I did, because I just had fun with it. What else do you have to add to that, Laura?
I think all of that. And then I think it's really important, a couple things. Being so driven to get vertical upside down is it can be like running after water in a desert. It's just like there's an oasis, and you have to really reframe this, because and I've battled with this, because I've been teaching handstands for so long, and I've sometimes thought, am I just tapping into that, like, compare culture or whatever? And it's like, but what I think it does is it brings your ego up right in front of you, for you to say, hey, this isn't about performing it, getting it, comparing myself to anybody up. It's really about getting to know myself, trusting myself, having patience with that, putting in some joy, some childlike, let's just go for it. But then for anybody, and I know like home life, like when we're older, we don't want to be fearful of falling, but we want to be really solid, because the fall is not the same as when we're a kid. And we know that in our mind, but we don't want to go into it with the fear. So what do you do to combat fear? You prep yourself like crazy. You really make it about, I'm going to feel so solid with my hands on the floor, with my scapula supporting me in the back. And I'm going to push like I would jump and hop off of the bottom foot. And forget about how much you get up. Focus on that structure. I can't tell you enough. Like, I see the change in people if they get the shoulders over the wrist and they just bend and push off, the bottom leg. And don't get over eager and start with the top leg, because that is where you start not trusting yourself, because maybe you go too far and then you panic, and that panic can really set you back. Because what we're really trying to do is feel at home in our bodies and safe in our bodies, and to transmit that in different directions, different angles, upside down, etc. So I think keep on the journey. It's a journey that will make you frustrated if you're just only going to be satisfied with that oasis, right? I think the actual day in and day out of practicing it and seeing how it feels, seeing if you feel lighter as you leave the ground, that to me is where we should be putting the focus and the joy. And that is the goal, is to feel that through action. So it's one of those, it's kind of like some poses, and this is a big one. It's either you're in it or you're not. And there's a lot longer you're not in it. We'll start to think about like you're actually in it in different ways when you have just a little bit of weight off the ground. So I hope that helps. Have fun.
Fun.
All right. As always, we love your questions. We love the variety of them. Ask us anything about the body, movement, lifestyle, energy, being a mom, being a parent, anything. We're up for it. So you can write us on Instagram, Laura.Hyman. Kristen is KB99Williams. You can write, or KB Williams 99. And then also you can just do it right to our Redefining Yoga podcast, which is at Redefining Yoga Podcast.
Yeah. You can also email us at support@lytyoga.com, and we'll get those questions answered for you. We would love if you would rate, review, subscribe to our podcast and to our Instagram, and check us out on YouTube. We've got some, if you want to watch us in action.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
Yep. So as always, we're so appreciative for you, and we're always
pulling
pulling for you. Yay!
Yay!